Welcome to the Faith Together podcast from the Center for Faith and Family at Olivet Nazarene University. If you believe that passing down Christian faith is essential for the next generation, you are in the right place. Enjoy conversations with guests who are faith practitioners, parents, caregivers, pastors, counselors, and many more. You'll enjoy practical tools and community for passing down Christian faith to your children and grandchildren. Welcome, everyone, to the Faith Together podcast, sponsored by the Center for Faith and Family at Olivet Nazarene University. I'm Leon, and I am so glad to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us. And, of course, I'm always here with Lindsey, and it's good to see you today, Lindsey.
Good to see you, too, Leon. This has been an exciting new series that we've jumped into here on Faith Together.
That's right. And before we get to that series, there's something else that was exciting that happened this weekend in your life.
Oh, yes, that is
so
true.
For those of you who don't know, we've kind of talked a little bit about it, I think, a while back.
Yeah, it was a few episodes ago.
Yeah, so Lindsey was ordained as an elder in the Church of the Nazarene this past weekend.
That is true.
And that is a huge deal in the Church of the Nazarene. It's not an easy process to go through and get to the place of ordination. In fact, it's 3 years of full-time ministry on top of a list of a bunch of educational things you have to do.
Yes.
And even though you've been at ministry longer than 3 years, you weren't kind of in the Nazarene cycle for ordination, right?
Right. So I had to do some catching up when I came back, and it was all worth it.
It's a big deal.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing that. It was a special moment and meaningful to be able to be here at Olivet, where it all began as a student, and to be on the Chicago Central area is really special. And Leon, I so appreciated having you there. You're a dear friend.
Oh, it was great.
And it was wonderful to have your support and many others. It was just a great weekend.
Well, I remember the day that I went through that. It was in Nashville, Tennessee, at one of our oldest churches in the Church of the Nazarene, Nashville First Church. And it was quite an experience. And I kind of equate it to like a marriage.
Yes.
I mean, it's that kind of a ceremony.
It is.
A lot of pomp and circumstance and all the stuff that goes with that.
Yes, and then all the message that Dr. Sundberg brought, and just being able to experience that with others that are on the journey was really special too. So
yeah, well, congratulations.
Thank you. Well,
okay, so back to our podcast.
Back to our podcast, yes. We know that last week everyone celebrated Easter, so happy Easter to everyone.
Yes.
And we kicked off on Easter Sunday a brand new series called Celebrating Easter, because we want you as families to celebrate Easter not just on Resurrection Sunday, but every day, right, Leon?
That's
we want
correct.
to keep sharing the story with our kids again and again.
Yeah, and one of the things that I try to remind my kids at church is that every Sunday we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. So it's not just Easter. Now, Easter's unique and special because we remember that particular day and event. But the truth is, Easter happens every Sunday as we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus.
That's right. And so over the next few episodes, we are going to focus on that resurrection hope that we have in Jesus and how he truly makes all things new. And I don't know about you, Leon, but I'm just very grateful for that truth this Easter season and this time of year, as spring is coming to a close and we're looking to summer and looking to so many new things this time of year. It's great to know that even the things that don't feel new or feel discouraging, we have our hope in Jesus.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So last week, we focused on sharing that hope with our kids through retelling the Easter story. And we gave a lot of creative ways you could do that.
We did.
On our episode last week. So if you haven't taken a listen, go back and listen in. It was a lot of fun. And then this week, we are going to focus on sharing hope with a dear friend of ours that we connected with at Children's Pastors Conference. Yes.
So, now, did you know her before the Children's Pastors Conference?
Yes, we did know each other prior. And author and speaker Kim Botto is who we're going to have on the show today. And she has written a wonderful book called Boundless Hope for Every Child, Help for the Hurting, Compassion for the Misunderstood, and Belonging for the Lonely. And one of the things that I've really respected about Kim over the years is that she has a heart for all kids, no matter what their background is, no matter what their learning style or their learning capabilities are. All kids should belong. Every child belongs. And so we got to meet her at the conference with our students. Do you remember that, Leon?
I do.
That was a lot of fun. The students loved meeting her, and she's just a champion for kids to know and love Jesus. And so let me give you just a little bit more background on her, and then we're going to welcome her to the show. Kim Botto has worked with children and teens for over 3 decades through churches, schools, nonprofit organizations, and adoption and foster care initiatives. She has a master's in family ministry and is a Trauma Free World affiliate trainer, a TBRI practitioner, and a frequent speaker on topics related to trauma, disability, and neurodivergence. She and her husband, Mark, live in the greater Cincinnati area, where she particularly loves spending time with her kids and 11, that's right, count them, 11 grandchildren. So,
oh, I'm jealous.
I know, that is so awesome. So let's welcome Kim. Hi, Kim.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you.
Cincinnati.
Yes.
My
Cincinnati.
grandkids live just outside of Cincinnati, across the river in Kentucky.
Oh, that's where I live. I live in northern Kentucky, but no, I live in a little bitty town in northern Kentucky that nobody's ever heard of.
Okay, so they live in Burlington.
Oh, yeah. So they're about 30 minutes from me. I am 3 miles from downtown Cincinnati. I'm as far north as you can be without being in the river.
Okay.
That's
awesome. Good. I'm glad you're not in the river.
And are you home right now, Kim? We know you travel a lot. So are you home?
I am home.
Wonderful.
I am home.
That's great.
Yes.
Great. Well, again, thank you for being here. We're just excited to
My pleasure.
talk through Boundless Hope.
Yeah, we're what I love the title of this book, Boundless Hope. So tell us what led you to write this book. Writing a book is a labor of love in many ways. So what led you to this?
Yeah, well, as Lindsey said, I have a passion for all kids, and I've worked with kids for decades. And when I was in high school, even I was drawn to the kid that was sitting outside of the circle, or the kid who was getting kicked out of their Sunday school classroom, or the kid who was screaming on the airplane. And so that I came to realize that was actually a calling on my life for me to advocate for those kids. And then we adopted our 2 youngest, one at the age of 10 and one at the age of 15, our 2 youngest daughters. And I began to see how a kid's background affects their behavior. So they're often misunderstood. So all that, and then I've also worked with a lot of kids who are neurodivergent or disabled. And the reason Boundless Hope is because I have looked into the eyes of a kid that have lost hope in themselves. And the reason often they've lost hope is because the adults around them lost hope first and would speak words like, you'll never amount to anything. You're bad. And I believe, as a follower of Jesus, we can have hope in all situations, and not just hope. We can have boundless hope. We can have, we can believe amazing things for this kid in front of us. And so that's why I want us to have boundless hope for every single child, because it's through our hope in them that they start to rebuild their hope, not only in themselves, but in the world around them and in the people around them and in God.
Yeah. Kim, you used a phrase that our listeners may not be real familiar with. Can you explain neurodivergent?
Sure. So it's not a medical term, it's a social term. And it was coined by Judy Springer in 1978. And what it means is it's people whose brains are wired differently than what a typical person's brain would be wired like. Kids or people who are autistic, ADHD, those are examples of neurodivergence. And when she coined it, and it really became, people started using the term, the big thing was, it's not a deficit. There's nothing wrong with the kid. Their brain processes things differently. They process the world around them differently. And as you can imagine, living in a world that's built for typical people, it's really hard if your brain doesn't process things like a typical person would.
Absolutely.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And I also loved when you shared about boundless hope begins with us as adults,
Mm-hmm.
as parents, as caregivers, that if we lose hope, how can we pass on hope to a child that's in our lives that needs it so desperately? And I think, Leon, that goes with kind of what we're about here at the center. We want parents to know that you have to find these truths to be relevant in your own life before passing them on to your kids.
Right.
Yeah, so that's why,
Absolutely.
this podcast, we love it being called Faith Together, because it really is a partnership of our faith with our child's faith. We can't give what we don't have. And so I just wanted to call that out because that really resonates with who we are too. So Kim, you begin your book with a great quote from, I believe it was Josh Shipp. You said he was a former foster youth, and his quote was this: "Every child is one caring adult away from being a success story." And while you agree with that quote, you also shared that you believe every child is actually one carrying community away from reaching their full potential. And for our listeners today, mostly parents that are listening in, there are probably many of them that may feel alone amidst their child's needs, whether that's neurodivergent needs, whether it's trauma-informed care, whatever it might be. What would you give as one step that parents who maybe feel alone can take towards a caring community?
First of all, I want parents to know that this feeling of being alone and feeling isolated, it's not unique to them. Parents who are raising kids who aren't typical, the most common response I get from them is that they do feel all alone, because it's really hard if your kid isn't developing the way other kids are developing, or if their behavior is such where people misunderstood them and maybe cast judgmental looks. You do just want to pull away and stay in your house. And you don't want your kid to experience that. So, what I would say is just take a step towards somebody. Invite somebody to come into your home, somebody that you trust. Also, depending on what your child's if you have a child with unique needs, depending on what their needs are, there are a lot of groups through Facebook and on the internet that you can be a part of. And this isn't going to answer your need for close community, but you can start to hear stories of other people that are similar to you and maybe ideas that they used to kind of break out of the loneliness. And one friend that I talked to, Carrie Baker, she actually just wrote a book too. And she said that when she got her son's diagnosis with autism, that they didn't tell anybody. They didn't even use the word in their house. And it was once she started being vulnerable with people and sharing some of the struggles that she was going through and that her child was going through, that's when she started to build community. Because really, so often we're afraid to share the hard stuff, but it's when we share the hard stuff. I mean, you guys think of your good friends. They're probably people you've shared hard stuff with, and the people that you're caring for and talking to, they've shared hard stuff with you too. So I would say be vulnerable and just take a step towards community, because God did not intend us to live alone. I mean, he talks about one another a lot. We're supposed to live in community.
Yeah, that's really true. We talk a lot about the importance of community on our podcast. I'm just thinking that my experience, and I'd like for you to talk a little bit about this, Kim. My experience has been that a lot of families who have children that struggle in different areas of their lives tend to avoid church because church often has rejected them. So how does a parent go about finding that kind of a church community? Maybe there's not a simple answer to this, but how does a parent go about finding a church community that will take their child as they are and love them and nurture them and speak into their lives?
Well, it is hard, and parents do give up because they will put themselves out there and be rejected, sometimes repeatedly. So I would talk to others in your community who have kids like you and see where they have found a church home. Also, there are organizations like Johnny and Friends where churches will self-identify as a place for every kid, a place for people with disabilities. And I it and this is one of the reasons I wrote the book, because I talked to so many families who really, really want to go to church, and whole families are staying at home on Sunday and missing out on community with their church community throughout the week because they have a child with behaviors where the church says, I don't know what to do. And I believe that Jesus welcomed all the kids. So I believe as followers of Jesus, we are to do that also.
Yeah.
So I would say don't give up. What I've seen some people do is they will do online Bible studies. Maybe for a period of time as you're looking for another church, don't give up on God. Even though you may feel like you've given up on church, don't give up on God. Continue to be in community with other believers. It may just look different, but also continue to try new places.
Yeah, because kids with these neurodivergent issues need community as well as anybody else.
Yes, they do.
Right. And
Yes,
so
they do.
finding a place where they can fit and be a part is so important.
Yeah, and I would
Right.
also add just that at the back of your book, for those of you that are listening that maybe are a part of your children's ministry at your local church, or you serve as a children's pastor like Leon and I, there's some great resources at the back of your book, Kim, for those of us that are in leadership, of how we can start a buddy program, come alongside families, and make sure that every child belongs in our environments for kids on Sundays or Saturdays, or Wednesdays, whenever you have
Right.
church.
Yeah.
Right. Throughout the week.
Uh-huh.
And also, the kids who do have differences, the kids who are neurodivergent, a lot of times their behavior or the way they engage with the world makes it really, really difficult in the church setting, because so much of the activities in the church setting are very social. It's interacting verbally, and they just have a really hard time with that. And so that's a wake-up call to churches, is to look at how we can change to make our spaces more welcoming.
Yeah.
And it's the kids who have these differences where they don't have, kids who have disabilities that are more obvious are typically more welcome in the church. It's the kids that have disabilities or differences that often impact their behavior.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
We
true.
talk a lot about the importance of speaking words of life and blessing to our kids on our podcast. So you wrote a chapter in your book titled Our Words Matter, with some pretty wonderful strategies for speaking positively to children in our lives. So would you share with us a few takeaways from that chapter that have been helpful to you when you're interacting with kids?
Sure. I think the most important thing to remember is kids believe what we say.
Mm-hmm.
And I know parents, I have 5 kids. Especially when my kids were little, there were days where I was just frustrated. And I had to stop and think, am I speaking words to them that build them up, or am I speaking words that tear them down? We can still correct. We can still have boundaries and expectations, but we can do it in a way that builds them up as we correct. And yeah, the book has like different connection strategies while you correct. So I think remembering, if we say, you are driving me crazy, the kid's going to believe that. Or if you say, you are too much, I can't stand to be around you, they're going to believe that. And the words we say become what they believe about themselves. So I think that's the most important thing to remember, is that they believe us. And then also, I think it's really important as parents for us to, as we're talking to our kids, expand our vocabulary. I'm a huge fan of feeling charts. Help our kids identify how they're feeling, what they're struggling with. And we need more words than just mad and bad and glad. And a feelings chart can help you do that. And I've talked to a lot of families that they will then have a feelings chart posted in their house. And a kid who, as we're talking to our kid and trying to figure out what's going on with them, often a feelings chart will help the kid identify that they're feeling scared, or that they're feeling lonely or frustrated. So I think those are two ideas. Oh, and I would also say, when we are using our words, praise publicly and correct privately.
Mm.
It's,
Yeah.
if we're out on a playground and our kid's doing something that we don't want them to do, which does happen because kids are kids and they're still figuring it out, we need to go over and privately correct them and talk to them about their behavior and what they could have done differently. And too often, if we're screaming it across the park, that can bring up shame in the kid. And we don't want to do that, because shame doesn't change behavior. We're still going to correct the behavior, but we're going to do it privately, and we're going to do it while we're connecting with the kid, and we're going to do it with compassion.
Yeah, that's so good.
Kim, for those who don't know, was it an emotion chart? Is that what you called it?
A feelings
chart?
A
feelings chart. For those who may not be familiar with that chart, can you just quickly kind of describe what that looks like?
Oh, yeah, I would love it, because it's my favorite tool. If you just search feelings chart or feelings wheel, they have charts for little kids that have these cute little adorable faces that convey without words how a kid is feeling. They also have, for older kids, their feeling wheels that have a wide range of different emotions. And it's really helpful, because a lot of adults have trouble expressing their emotions too. So if you just search it, you will find a wide variety to use.
Yes, and I love that on feelings wheels and on feelings charts, the word or the emotion fine is not on there. You ask a kid, like, how are you? I'm fine. And we'll say, well, that's not on our chart. What do you have? How do you feel? So, yeah, those are really good tools. And we've talked about this before, Leon. I think it might have been last season, but just naming our emotions helps us to kind of reframe what needs to happen next. And
was that a part of our healthy parenting series?
I think so.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, where we talked about just naming emotions, and that in the naming, it really, it sets you free to kind of have a new perspective. And I would agree, Kim, they're some of my very favorite tools to use with kids and even with adults. Sometimes I need a feelings wheel, How am I feeling right now? I need some guidance. Well,
and I'll say Dan Siegel says, name it to tame it.
Oh, yes, he does. You're right.
And so that's what we're doing. We're helping them name it, which can then help them regulate and calm.
Yes. That's so good. So very good. Well, at the conclusion of your book, you share 3 tips for anyone engaging with kids or teens. And these just really stuck out to us. We thought they were fantastic. And the 3 tips are: be curious, be flexible, and be kind. And would you mind just sharing a little bit about each of those with our listeners today?
Sure. So, yeah, and it works with any kid, whatever setting. Be curious. I think that is the greatest skill that we should be practicing when we engage with kids. And Dr. Karen Purvis, who is a pioneer in working with kids from trauma, she said behavior is the language of children who have lost their voice. So if we're curious, when a kid is acting in a way that doesn't meet expectations, we're going to be trying to get underneath that. Like, what is causing that? Some people say, for no reason, there's always a reason.
Yes.
There's some reason. Maybe they're hungry, maybe they're tired, maybe it's because things happened to them years ago. So it's be curious and really look underneath the behavior. And then be kind. Assume a child is doing the best they can. Another one of my favorites, Dr. Ross Green, says, children do well when they can. So what that means, if we encounter a kid who's not doing well, they need our help. So be kind, assume the best, and help them. And the last one, which is be flexible. Sometimes, I know I've done this with my own kids. I get too caught up in this is the way it's going to be. And a kid might need a modification or a change to the schedule. And really, if I just take a step back and take a big, deep breath, it really doesn't make any difference if they read their book for 5 more minutes before bedtime, that they want to read their chapter. Or I was walking my grandson the other day. He's 7 and he's autistic, and it was raining and he wanted to sit down in the grass. And I kept trying to get him up. And then I thought, wait a minute, what am I'm getting him outside to get fresh air. I'm not trying to get a certain amount of steps in for him. I want him to get fresh air. And if he wants to sit in a mud puddle, well, I got a washer and dryer. And so I'm flexible, like always be open to seeing how you might change in order to better meet the needs of your kid.
I love that.
I do too. And Kim, I know that one of your points throughout the book that you bring up is all about saying yes as much as you can. And that's been something that has really helped me in my work and leadership, specifically, in ministry with kids when you don't know them super well and you might come up against some of those behaviors. It's finding that flexibility in your own mind of, okay, I can stop and find a way to say yes in the midst of this and see how that opens up trust and builds trust between us and through the kids that need it the most. So that is so good. Well, thank you again, Kim, for just coming on today. This has been such a helpful and hopeful conversation. And I hope that for all of our listeners out there, as you've listened to Kim, that you just find something to take away that will just encourage you in your parenting, in your care to the kids that you love so much. We're excited next week to be wrapping up our Celebrating Easter series with our final episode of the season, Leon.
Wow.
I know.
That's come quick.
It has flown by. But we are going to be focusing on the hope of Jesus through some special guests that we're going to have on that are kids who have their very own podcast.
Yes.
So that's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then we're also just going to celebrate, remember, and share what the Lord has done in this year through the Faith Together podcast and the work of the center. So we hope you'll join us for next week.
Yes. And again, thank you, Kim, for your investment in writing this book for us.
Thank you, Lindsey and Leon. It was fun being with you.
Yeah, great being with you as well.
Fun to be with you too.
Well, get Kim's book and read it and help give hope to your children so that they grow up to be faithful followers of Jesus who make an impact in the world in which we live. May the Lord bless you, keep you, and give you peace. You've been listening to the Faith Together podcast from the Center for Faith and Family at Olivet Nazarene University. Sign up for additional resources at centerff.com. When building faith, we are better together.